The story opens with a scene at a drive-in theater, where people are enjoying a movie from inside their cars. Amidst the crowd, we are introduced to Harlan, a man who once served as a soldier but is now known as the leader of a criminal group. While drinking with his girlfriend, Harlan suddenly starts choking. Instead of helping him, his girlfriend laughs and teases him to be more careful. Unfortunately, the arrogant Harlan feels offended and angry. He begins to abuse his girlfriend.
Fucking whore. Take it. All of it.
One of the viewers who sees the incident steps out of his car and tries to stop Harlan. But instead of backing off, Harlan turns on the man and attacks him. After venting his rage, Harlan leaves his girlfriend just like that. The story then shifts to a steel mill in a small town. Here, we meet Russell, a hardworking man who has been working at the factory for 3 years, spending almost every day there. On his way home, Russell sees his younger brother's car parked near a horse racing arena that also serves as a gambling place. Feeling concerned, he decides to go inside and meet his brother. His brother's name is Rodney. Russell then asks Rodney to come outside for a talk. He begins to question where Rodney keeps getting the money to gamble.
The money? I'm giving you shit, I'm just wondering.
At first, Rodney is reluctant to answer, but after being pressed, he finally admits that he has been borrowing money from a loan shark named John. Rodney also confesses that he has piled up a lot of debt and hasn't been able to pay it off. Hearing this, Russell is of course disappointed, but as a big brother, he can't bring himself to scold Rodney too harshly. Instead, he promises to help pay off part of the debt once he gets his next paycheck.
$1,500? Oh, John Petty, motherfucker gave me a tip, didn't pay off.
The next day, Russell visits their sick father's house. Their father lives with their uncle, and Rodney also lives there. From their conversation, we learn that Rodney is actually a soldier who will soon be deployed back to Iraq.
Drink later? I feel good.
Yeah, that's why I'm okay.
One night, Russell goes to a bar in the middle of town. It turns out he wants to meet John, the loan shark who lent money to his brother. But before he gets the chance to speak, Russell hears someone threatening John. It turns out the man is Harlan. He's angry because John refused to cooperate in the illegal drug distribution business. This is where we start to see that Harlan is not just hot-tempered, but also deeply involved in a much more dangerous criminal world. Here, Harlan was a little annoyed with Russell because he was rude for just walking in. But Russell replied that he also had business with John.
Come back later?
No, it's okay. Your mama teach you to barge in like that?
After that, John asked what Russell's purpose was for coming to him. Russell immediately gave some money to John because it turned out that he came to pay off Rodney's debt, his younger brother's. Unfortunately, the money was still lacking, and Russell promised to pay it off after the next payday.
Well, would you mind not telling him I brought you?
I hate that you work your ass off to pay his debt.
Before leaving, Russell was served a glass of drink as a thank you for paying the debt. However, on his way home, Russell accidentally hits a car that suddenly passes by.
Hell, fella. You hear me?
The accident killed a child and his mother who were in the car. Because Russell was still under the influence of the alcohol he drank earlier, he was eventually found guilty and had to stay in prison for 3 years. While in prison, Rodney visited Russell. Rodney says that their father is still sickly and is now cared for by their uncle. Meanwhile, Rodney himself was about to leave for Iraq for his first tour of duty as a soldier. Hearing that, Russell advised his younger brother to always take care of himself while on duty in Iraq. Russell also asked his younger brother to continue praying for their father's recovery. A few months later, Russell chose not to interact with the gangsters in prison. This was done because Russell did not want to be involved in any crimes in prison to get remission. However, this made some prisoners feel annoyed and considered Russell arrogant. One time, Russell was approached by 2 prisoners who immediately ganged up on him. A year passed, and Russell was again visited by Rodney, who had just returned from serving in Iraq. Here, Rodney informed them that their father had died 3 days ago. Hearing the sad news, Russell immediately burst into tears. Russell feels very guilty that he couldn't take care of his father and is instead locked up in prison.
I put him next to Mom.
Yeah. He's trying to hang on till you got out. He wanted to see you.
In our sorrows, yet we did esteem him.
Long story short, because Russell continued to behave well, he was finally released from prison within a fairly short time. He was immediately greeted by Rodney, who was ready to bring his brother home. On the way, Russell asked his younger brother to stop by their father's grave first. Later that night, Rodney told Russell that he had left the military because he did not want to return to serve in Iraq. Hearing this, Russell, as an older brother, still supported Rodney's decision. One day, Russell saw his ex-wife, who was now dating a policeman. Russell still loves her very much, but he realizes that he is not the person his ex-wife wants. Now Russell is back working at the metal factory. Although he is an ex-convict, the factory is still willing to accept him. Meanwhile, Rodney shows that he is now a street fighter. Rodney does this to pay off all his debts to John. While Russell is in prison, Rodney still often borrows money from John, a loan shark. Rodney, who should have relented at the time, continued to beat his opponent because his opponent had insulted their parents. This made John upset because John had placed a bet on Rodney's defeat. Here, Rodney could only apologize for breaking their agreement. He promised John that he would repay his debt in another fight. John, who thought Rodney could not control his emotions when fighting, then asked Rodney to just work in a metal factory with his brother. However, Rodney replied that he was ashamed to work as a factory laborer. The next day, at home, Russell found a cloth covered in blood. When Russell saw his brother's hand, he realized that his brother had been a street fighter. Russell asked his brother to end it all and work in the metal factory with him.
Come work in the mill. What do you think I should do?
What I think you should do.
However, Rodney refuses and explains that the reason he became a street fighter was because he was depressed after returning from Iraq. The only thing that calmed him down was fighting.
What's it fucking done for me?
A few days later, Russell was reckless enough to meet his ex-wife, who was a kindergarten teacher. There, Russell, who still loved her, boldly invited his ex-wife to get back together. However, with a heavy heart, his ex-wife refused. Russell asked if her refusal was because his ex-wife no longer loved him. Finally, the ex-wife explained that she was now pregnant with the child of her new boyfriend. Suddenly, this left Russell heartbroken and speechless. Meanwhile, on the other hand, Rodney met John at his residence. There, Rodney asked John to take him to the Ramapos area to fight. Ramapos is known to be an area inhabited by bandits, and street fights are often held with very large prizes. John asked why Rodney wanted to fight in Ramapos. Rodney replied that if he fought there, then the prize could immediately pay off all his debts.
I'm not doing it, Rodney. I'm not gonna call him.
John, I don't really have. Where's the big fucking deal?
Hearing that, John, who still felt sorry for Rodney, explained that fighting there was very dangerous. The match organizers often cheated for their own interests. In fact, fighters often died there. However, the stubborn Rodney continued to push John to take him to fight there, regardless of the risks. Finally, John complied with Rodney's request and contacted the match organizer, who turned out to be Harlan. The next day, Russell was visited by his uncle to take Russell hunting. Russell, who happened to be heartbroken, of course, immediately accepted the invitation. On the other hand, Rodney has now traveled with John to Ramapos to meet Harlan. Upon arrival, John immediately introduces Rodney to Harlan because he is the one who will fight. However, Harlan is a little dismissive of Rodney's abilities, who doesn't look like a great fighter. Rodney, who was provoked by his emotions, said that he was a former soldier. Rodney also immediately invites Harlan to a duel to prove his skill. After that, Harlan asked Rodney why a soldier would want to fight with his own citizens. Rodney replied that it was all just for money. Then, Harlan sent Rodney out because he wanted to talk one-on-one with John. After they made a deal, John went back to see Rodney. Here, John explains that if Rodney really wants the money, then Rodney should just lose the match they're having this afternoon. Initially, Rodney refused because he often failed to control his temper. However, this time, John really begged Rodney to give in to the match. At the same time, Russell and his uncle had just arrived in the forest to hunt. On one occasion, Russell found a deer and immediately aimed at the animal. However, when the trigger of his gun was about to be pulled, Russell suddenly felt sorry, so he didn't shoot the deer. In the afternoon, it shows Rodney, who is now going to fight. Before that, John again reminds Rodney that he wants to lose in this match because if Rodney wins, Harlan's group will definitely finish them both. After that, the fight began. In the middle of the fight, Rodney was provoked by his enemy, so he continued to beat his enemy. John was immediately worried that Rodney would lose control again, so he went downstairs to shout at Rodney. After being yelled at several times, Rodney finally put his ego down. He immediately chose to remain silent when he was beaten back by his enemy. On the other hand, Russell and his uncle are about to return home. The scene returns to Rodney, who continues to be severely beaten by his enemy. Luckily, John immediately stops the match and takes Rodney out of the arena before the enemy can kill him. Not long after, Harlan approached Rodney and John. Here, Harlan immediately gave his money according to their previous agreement. Harlan also thanked Rodney, who was now helpless. Later that night, Rodney and John decided to head home. John, who was afraid of being robbed, deliberately recorded all their conversations while passing through Ramapos territory. A few minutes after that, they were actually robbed by several bandits who blocked the car. Apparently, the leader of the bandits was none other than Harlan. Initially, Harlan asked John to get out. However, because John refused, Harlan immediately finished him off. Apparently, Harlan did all this because he had a grudge against John, who had refused to cooperate in distributing illegal drugs. Then, Harlan asked his men to take Rodney to the middle of the forest. Once there, Rodney was immediately finished off by Harlan and buried there. On the other hand, Russell, who was already at home, accidentally found a letter written by Rodney. In the letter, Rodney explained that he apologized to his brother. He also mentioned that the fight was the last time, and after that, Rodney would work in a metal factory with his brother. The next morning, Russell was visited by a policeman named Wesley, who was the new boyfriend of his ex-wife. Russell initially thought that Wesley would be angry because yesterday, Russell invited back his ex-wife. However, it turns out that Wesley's arrival wants to talk about something else, and he immediately invites Russell to the police station. While at the police station, Russell was informed that John was found dead on a road in the Ramapos area. Meanwhile, Russell's younger brother, who was known to be with John at the time, has still not been found. The police had also found footage showing that the perpetrator of the crime was Harlan. Unfortunately, no one in Ramapos would cooperate or show them where Harlan was.
I do have a procedure. I said that they're having a difficult time.
They aren't gonna...
After that, Russell, who doubted the police's work, went to his uncle. Apparently, he wanted to invite his uncle to look for Harlan in the Ramapos area. On the same day, they both set out there. Upon arrival in the Ramapos area, Russell and his uncle tried to ask the residents about Harlan's whereabouts. Unfortunately, the residents always answered that they didn't know. Later that evening, Russell went to a place where bandits gathered. Russell, who was looking for Harlan this time, pretended to want to buy illegal drugs from them.
Fellas, what you looking for, man?
Whatever you got, you know.
Who's the old man in the truck?
Oh, don't worry about him. He ain't a cop either.
You a fucking cop?
At first, they suspected that Russell was an undercover cop. But fortunately, one of them knew that Russell was an ex-con he had seen in prison. Then, Russell was brought into their headquarters to deliver the illicit drugs.
Well, then you come to the right place.
After receiving the drug, Russell asked where Harlan was. Suddenly, the bandits were shocked because the place Russell came to was now Harlan's headquarters. After learning about the location of his headquarters, Russell rushed off to organize a strategy. However, while on the road, they were approached by a policeman. The policeman said that Russell and his uncle had to return home immediately because if Russell intervened in his younger brother's case, the police would rearrest him. This was because the police were afraid that Russell and his uncle would disrupt the investigation. The next day, Wesley visits Russell. Wesley said that Rodney had been found dead and his body buried in a forest. Wesley promised that he and the other police officers would arrest Harlan soon, but he begged Russell not to do anything first and to leave the case to the police. Russell finally complies with Wesley and tells him about the location of Harlan's base, which he visited last night. Long story short, the police tried to raid Harlan's headquarters based on information from Russell.
Police, on the ground! Get out! Police, get out of the ground!
Unfortunately, by that time, Harlan and all his men had already escaped. Several months passed, but the police were never able to catch Harlan. This clearly upset Russell, so he was determined to avenge Harlan's crimes by himself. Russell then went to John's residence to find Harlan's phone number. John's confidant, Den, had warned Russell not to deal with Harlan. However, Russell remained reckless and told Den to leave the place and not come back for a few weeks. After finding Harlan's phone number, Russell immediately contacted him and asked him to meet at John's headquarters at 4 a.m. Russell reasoned that he would buy a large amount of illegal drugs because he had managed to take over all of John's money. At 4 a.m., Harlan and one of his men arrived at John's residence. Russell immediately hid to lure Harlan and his men in. Inside, Harlan met Den, even though Russell had warned Den to leave immediately. Then, Russell went inside and finished off Harlan's men. However, when he wanted to approach Harlan, Harlan first finished off Den and then rushed away from the place.
Julie, call 911.
No!
Oh, goddamn.
Russell continued to chase Harlan until, at one point, he caught up with him, and they engaged in a duel.
Get up.
Luckily, Russell managed to win the duel. He shot Harlan in the leg and told him to walk. As Harlan walked, Russell shot him again.
Tough kid. On your bases, bro.
Here, Russell told Harlan that he was the older brother of Rodney, the man Harlan had killed and his body buried in the forest. Then, Harlan walked back in the hope that Russell would forgive him. But at the same time, Wesley arrives and immediately tells Russell not to kill Harlan. Wesley also warned that Russell could go back to prison if he did. However, Russell, who desperately wanted to avenge his brother's death without thinking, immediately shot Harlan in the head.
Russell!
After all these events, we are shown that Russell was not jailed because Wesley covered up the incident as if Wesley was the one who killed Harlan. If you enjoyed this video, don't be shy, hit the like button, and if you disliked it, hit the dislike button twice just to be sure. You should watch the full movie. Thank you very much for watching.